Endocrinology Minutes with Cyan. Overview of endocrinology disease. In this chapter, we will briefly touch on the hypothalamic, pituitary, pineal gland, and neuroendocrine disease. A thorough introduction about a home must contain its chemistry and evolution features, anatomic distribution, receptors and regulations, functions, and related disease or therapy. Here, we just simply started with a few properties of these homes. Further information will be introduced in their specific chapter. Neurons and neural secretion. Neurons are excitable cells that send their axons throughout the nervous system to release their neurotransmitters and neuromodulators predominantly as specialized chemical synapses. Neuroendocrinology means the process that peptide and monoamine signals molecules secrete from the special neurons into the peripheral circulation. The nervous system controls or modifies the functions of both endocrine and exocrine glands. The afferent arms of the autonomic nervous system comprise the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. A variety of mechanisms including gene mutations, epigenetic alterations, tumors, inflammatory states, infections, vascular abnormalities, trauma, and psychogenic states can produce neuroendocrine disease involving the hypothalamus. A home or the factor regulates it are not necessarily secrete from a central organ or a typical endocrine gland. Leptin is the adipostatic home. A reduction in circulating leptin is responsible for suppression of the thyroid and reproductive axis during the starvation response. Ghrelin is a stomach peptide which regulates appetite and also acts on multiple endocrine axes. Endocrine rhythms. Many endogenous rhythms have a period of approximately 24 hours. It is called circadian. It means around a day or diurnal rhythms. Rhythms that occur more frequently than once a day are called ultradian. Infradian rhythms have a period longer than 1 day, as in the approximately 27-day human menstrual cycle and the yearly breeding patterns of some animals. Most homeostatic activities are also rhythmic, including body temperature, water balance, blood volume, and sleep. Neural control of the endocrine secretion. We'll take hypothalamic pituitary unit as an example. A key principle is that the hypothalamus receives sensory inputs from the external environment like light, nociception, temperature, odorant, and information regarding the internal environment like blood pressure, blood osmolality, blood glucose levels. Of particular relevance to neuroendocrine control, homes like glucocorticoids, gonadosteroids, thyroid hormones, or leptin exert both negative and positive feedback directly on the hypothalamus. Two key concepts involved in the central nervous system development, which also apply to the hypothalamus, are the balance between neurogenesis and cell death in the establishment of nuclei and the role of circulating hormones in providing organizational signals that regulate cell number and synaptic remodeling. The pituitary gland is regulated by three interacting elements: hypothalamic inputs, releasing factors or hypophysiotrophic hormones, feedback effects of circulating hormones, and paracrine and autocrine secretions of the pituitary itself. Next, we'll introduce some of the impressive characteristics of some hormones or related factors to you. Alarm again, for detailed information, a textbook is required. Pineal gland and melatonin. The pineal integrates information encoded by light into coordinate secretions that underlie biologic rhythmicity. The pineal is the source of melatonin. In absence of light input, the pineal gland rhythms persist but are not entrained to the external light-dark cycle. Physiologic roles of melatonin. One of the best characterized roles of melatonin is the regulation of the reproductive axis, including gonadotropin secretion and the timing and onset of puberty. Removal of the pineal leads to precocious puberty. In addition, male rats exposed to constant darkness or blindness by enucleation display testicular atrophy and decreased levels of testosterone. Melatonin inhibits luteinizing hormone release from the rat pars tuberalis. The exact mechanisms of melatonin regulation of gonadotropin releasing hormone release are unsettled. The role of the pineal in human reproduction is even less understood. Melatonin therapies in humans. Melatonin is purported to exert multiple beneficial functions that include slowing or reversing the progression of aging, protecting against ischemic damage after vascular reperfusion, and enhancing immune function. There is limited evidence for significant clinical efficacy and long-term safety about melatonin therapy for phase shifting and resetting circadian rhythms like jet lag and sleep disorders. Thyrotropin-releasing hormone is present in virtually all parts of the brain. It is also found in pancreatic islet cells and in the gastrointestinal tract. Central thermoregulation is the major non-hypophysiotropic actions of thyrotropin-releasing hormone. Many depressed patients have a blunt thyrotropin response to it. Thyrotropin varies under different circumstances, including but not limited to neural control, circadian rhythms, temperature, stress, starvation, infection, and inflammation. Thyrotropin secretion is also modified by other hormones, including estrogens, glucocorticoids, and possibly growth hormone, and is inhibited by cytokines in the pituitary and hypothalamus. Corticotropin-releasing hormone. Activation of central corticotropin-releasing hormone pathways is a critical neurobiologic substrate for anxiety and depressed states. Corticotropin-releasing hormone receptor 1 antagonist has produced considerable interest in their potential for treatment of anxiety and depression. The corticotropin-releasing hormone and urocortin system work in the neurobiology of addiction and serve as a therapeutic target. Adrenal corticotropin hormone. Glucocorticoids can block stress-induced adrenal corticotropic hormone release. The latency of the inhibitory effect is so short that it is likely that the gene regulation is not the sole basis of the response. However, long-term suppression clearly acts through genomic mechanisms. Growth hormone and growth hormone-releasing hormone stimulates growth in children. It is being investigated for the treatment for sleep disorders commonly associated with aging. Negative feedback control of growth hormone release is mediated by growth hormone itself and by insulin-like growth factor 1, which is synthesized in the liver and other tissues and inhibits growth hormone secretion at the level of the pituitary gland and gene expression. Somatostatin. A variety of endocrine tumors and inflammatory lesions are also visualized, all of which have in common the expression of somatostatin receptors. Such tumors include non-small cell cancer of the lung, meningioma, breast cancer, and astrocytomas. Prolactin-regulating factors. Dopamine is present in hypophyseal portal vessel blood in sufficient concentration to inhibit prolactin release. External stimuli for 1 to 3 minutes can remain the elevated prolactin levels for 10 to 20 minutes. Gonadotropin-releasing hormone. Children with precocious puberty can be maintained with long-activating gonadotropin-releasing hormone agonists for years to suppress the premature activation of the reproductive axis. In this part, we will focus on some neuroendocrine diseases. They certainly cast non-endocrine affections. Neuroendocrine disease. Disease of the hypothalamus can cause pituitary dysfunctions, neuropsychiatric, and behavioral disorders. In the diagnosis and treatment of suspected hypothalamic or pituitary disease, 4 issues must be considered: the extent of the lesion, the physiological impact, the specific cause, and the psychosocial settings. Pituitary isolation syndrome. Destructive lesions of the pituitary stalk, as occur with head injury, surgical transection, tumor, or granuloma, produce a characteristic pattern of pituitary dysfunction. Humans with stalk sections or with tumors of the stalk region have widely varying levels of hyperprolactinemia and may have galactorrhea or syndrome of inappropriate antidiuretic home. An incomplete pituitary isolation syndrome may occur with the empty cell syndrome, intracellular cysts, or pituitary adenomas. Anterior pituitary failure after stalk section is in part due to loss of specific neural and vascular links to the hypothalamus and in part due to pituitary infarction. Hypophysiotropic hormone deficiency. Isolated gonadotropin-releasing hormone deficiency is the most common hypophysiotropic hormone deficiency. Gonadotropin deficiency commonly associated with hyposmia. In common syndrome, hereditary agenesis of the olfactory lobe may be demonstrable by MRI. Common syndrome or hypogonadotropic hypogonadism are associated with anosmia. Other malformations of the cranial midline structures, such as the absence of the septum pellucidum in septo-optimic dysplasia, can cause hypogonadotropic hypogonadism or, less commonly, precocious puberty. Gonadotropin-releasing hormone deficiency appears to be the principal cause of growth hormone deficiency in children with idiopathic dwarfism. Craniopharyngioma. Increased intracranial pressure and compressions of the optic chiasms or nerves can cause visual field defects, papilledema, and optic atrophy. The most frequent hormone deficiencies are growth hormone and gonadotropins. Thyroid-stimulating hormone and adrenocorticotropic hormone deficiency are also common. Hypophysiotropic hormone hypersecretion. Gonadotropin-releasing hormone-secreting hematomas can cause precocious puberty. Corticotropin-releasing hormone-secreting gangliocytomas can cause Cushing syndrome. And growth hormone-releasing hormone-secreting gangliocytomas of the hypothalamus can cause acromegaly. Bronchial carcinoids and pancreatic islet cell tumors also contribute to corticotropin-releasing hormone and growth hormone-releasing hormone secreting. Hypothyroidism. Hypothyroidism can cause precocious puberty in girls that is reversible with thyroid therapy. Hyperprolactinemia and galactorrhea may be present. One possibility is that elevated thyroid-stimulating hormone levels in children with thyroid failure cross-react with the follicle-stimulating hormone receptor. Alternatively, low levels of thyroid hormone might simultaneously activate release of luteinizing hormone, follicle-stimulating hormone, and thyroid-stimulating hormone. A third possibility is that hypothyroidism causes hypothalamic encephalopathy that impairs the normal tonic suppression of gonadotropin releasing by the hypothalamus. Pineal tumor is associated with high plasma levels of human chorionic gonadotropin. The human chorionic gonadotropin can stimulate testosterone secretion from the testes, but not estrogen secretion by the ovary. It therefore causes premature puberty almost exclusively in boys. Psychogenic amenorrhea. Exercise-induced amenorrhea results from loss of body fat. Fat mass may be a regulator for gonadotropin secretion with adipocyte-derived leptin, the deficiency of which is associated with estrogen deficiency and accompanying osteopenia. Hypothalamic disease. Psychological abnormalities in hypothalamic disease include antisocial behavior, attacks of rage, laughing and crying, disturbed sleeping patterns, excessive sexuality, and hallucinations. Sleep patterns like somnolence and narcolepsy, eating patterns including hyperphagia, bulimia, and anorexia, imbalance in energy homeostasis, both obesity and cachexia, can be manifested through different regions of damage in hypothalamus. Poorer control in body temperature, as we call it, poorer poikilothermy, are common in patients with hypothalamic damage. Disturbance of sweating, acrocyanosis, loss of sphincter control, and diencephalic epilepsy are occasional manifestations. Commercial time. In light of the extraordinary circumstances of COVID-19 this year, the 8th Asia Pacific Congress on Controversies to Consensus in Diabetes, Obesity, and Hypertension will be online on June 6, 2020 from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. China Standard Time. Welcome to scan the code into their live broadcast then. Simultaneous interpretation in Chinese will be provided. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, just replay it. If you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to contact me through email. If there is the next episode, see you then!